Good afternoon or good morning again, wherever you're located. My name is Stephanie Sosa-Coulter, and I am the Deputy Director for the National Affordable Housing Retrofit Initiative at ACEEE. I want to start by thanking you for joining this webinar, New Federal Funding Opportunities for Affordable Housing Retrofits. I hope you gain some knowledge and are inspired by the amazing work that our speakers are doing. Before we get started, I want to make some housekeeping announcements. We are recording this webinar and we'll be making it available to all registrants within a few business days. To ask a question during the webinar, please submit it via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to it during our Q&A segment towards the end of the webinar. We also encourage you to upvote questions you think are particularly good, and we will prioritize those during the Q&A segment. You can talk to one another and network via the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, where you work and where you're located. So the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, also known as ACEEE, is a nonprofit research organization. We develop policies to reduce energy waste and combat climate change. And our independent analysis advance investments, programs, and behaviors that use energy more effectively and help build an equitable, clean energy future. Today, we will be discussing how the historic influx of federal funding has given state and local governments an opportunity to increase investments in retrofits for low and moderate income housing. Some jurisdictions are already using funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, to create and scale retrofit programs that address local community priorities, such as job creation, health and comfort, and reducing energy costs to make housing more affordable for families that need it the most. But we know that there's still funds available and a lot of work to be done. So our speakers for today's webinar are Nick Henner, a policy analyst at ACEEE, Michael Stoddard, the Executive Director of Efficiency Maine Trust, and Jessica Aberlin, Building Energy Performance Standards Strategy and Engagement Lead for the District of Columbia Department of Energy and Environment. So I'm going to kick it off to Nick Henner at ACEEE, who will be discussing some of the funding opportunities that have been made available by the federal government.
Thanks, Stephanie. So as Stephanie mentioned, I'm Nick Henner. I'm a policy analyst here at ACEEE. And for a quick outline of what I'll be presenting today, first, I'm going to start with some background information about why ACEEE thinks this topic is so important and how it aligns with our call to action. I'll then go over some aspects of federal funding opportunities from the listed pieces of legislation that can potentially be put toward affordable housing retrofits. And then the major focus will be on ARPA, because there's a lot of opportunity with this funding, and to showcase some of the great examples that are happening today. So as part of our commitment to equitably reduce GHG emissions, ACEEE has developed a body of work around energy burden, equity metrics, and affordable housing retrofits. This includes an upcoming opportunity for state and local governments and their partners to receive capacity building from ACEEE and our partners to help them scale retrofits in their low and moderate income housing. We'll be able to say more about this in September. So if you're interested in learning more, please sign up in the link posted to the chat. What ACEEE has learned about energy burden is that these are disproportionately high for low-income, Indigenous, and people of color households. And that energy upgrades can play a large role in reducing these burdens. An energy burden is the percentage of household income that is spent on energy costs. As you can see here, there's a huge disparity in the level of energy burden between national median households and low-income households. Our energy burden report estimates that home weatherization can reduce energy burdens in low-income households by about 25%. Yet, it's estimated, yet far too few of these households are receiving such upgrades. It's estimated that low-income households make up only 70% of those that say they completed energy efficiency improvements in the past 2 years. Throughout our work on energy burden, equity, and affordable housing, community-based organizations have been indispensable partners. It is likewise essential that state and local government partners meaningfully work with community-based organizations to make sure that retrofit programs respond to community needs, such as accountability, addressing health issues, creating good local jobs, preserving housing affordability, among other important items. The images and links shown here provide some guidance on how to engage the community in ways that go beyond seeking feedback, but instead truly respect and encourage community leadership. Well, the most exciting news of the past week, we have the proposed Inflation Reduction Act. If passed, and they're hoping to pass it in the Senate this week and in the House shortly after, this would be the largest US investment in climate action. The bullet items listed include some of the proposed funding opportunities that could be available to make affordable housing healthier and more efficient. And next, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which increases funding to existing programs that can be put to use toward energy retrofits for households that need it the most, as well as funds new ones, such as the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund, in which further guidance is expected to be shared by DOE later this year. And now, onto the American Rescue Plan Act. From ARPA, $350 billion have been dispersed to state, local, and tribal governments via coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. And the latest estimates show that only 40.8% of those funds have been budgeted by local governments. And this estimate is based on spending decisions from 329 cities and counties that have at least 200,000 residents. And I want to thank all the organizations listed on this slide for diligently tracking these allocations. And 60% of the funds dispersed to states and territories are estimated to have been budgeted. I don't have a calculator in front of me, but this means that billions and billions of dollars are still looking for a good home. The flexibility of this funding was left vague intentionally, so states and local governments can put these dollars to the areas of highest impact in their communities, including weatherizing homes for households most in need. The Treasury encourages recipients to use these allocations to design a wide variety of affordable housing interventions, including production, rehabilitation, and preservation of affordable rental housing. The Treasury's final rule clarifies that low-income households should be defined as at or below 40% of area median income, and that moderate income households should be defined as at or below 65% of AMI, which is for purposes of determining presumptive eligibility as disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. But state and local governments can also conduct their own analysis to determine populations that may be outside of these numbers that they consider disproportionately affected from the pandemic. So we know that these funds can be used to retrofit affordable housing, but have they been? The answer is yes. All over the country, these funds have been or are planned to be used to start new or add additional funding to existing programs that directly improve the lives of LMI households. Our next two speakers are to go into great detail about two of these exciting programs, but first I want to showcase a couple others. The first one is the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection, Energy and Environmental Protection, or DEEP's, Weatherization Barrier Remediation Program. This program addresses weatherization deferrals, or households that are unable to access weatherization programs like WAP because of health and safety issues, but would otherwise be eligible. Some of these deferrals are caused because of, and not limited to, dangerous levels of mold and asbestos found in the home. Connecticut has recognized that 25% of income eligible applicants in their state cannot access their weatherization program because of these health and safety issues. And this $12.7 million program is funded using $7 million of ARPA funds, with the remaining funding from LIHEAP and the State Energy Program. Connecticut has also allocated an additional $7 million of ARPA funds to the Energy Efficiency Retrofit for Affordable Housing Program to complement this program. After barrier remediation, households receive energy efficiency improvements through either Connecticut's state-managed or utility-managed weatherization programs. The next program I want to highlight is the Michigan Housing Authority's Promoting Energy Efficiency Program, or Michigan HOPE. This grant program, funded via ARPA, is led by the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. And I'd like to point out that every state has a housing finance agency, and they can make great partners for energy efficiency programs. Funding in this program, funding of up to $1 million will be made available to subrecipients, which consist of local governments and nonprofits, via competitive grant process to administer the program locally and provide up to $25,000 in energy efficiency assistance per eligible household. And a minimum of 30% of the funds from this program are set aside to assist households within rural communities across Michigan. And of that 30%, 5% will be set aside to assist households located in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, which is, of course, not on the Michigan Mitten. Well, thank you everyone for listening. And if you want to learn more about our upcoming capacity building opportunities to scale retrofits of LMI housing in your communities, please click the link that will again be shared in the chat. Thanks again, and now I will pass it over to Michael.
Nick, I'm ready to share my screen as soon as somebody else stops sharing. There we go. Let me know when you see that.
We can see it.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Stoddard. I'm the Executive Director of the Efficiency Maine Trust, based in Augusta, Maine, and I really appreciate ACEEE setting this up, and I'm grateful for everyone joining us for this discussion. Very quickly, for those who are not familiar with our organization, we play the role that in most states is played by your utilities running your energy conservation programs. But in Maine, we've put all of that under one roof at a quasi-state agency we call the Efficiency Maine Trust. It's an independent agency that's been running for a little more than a decade now. We have an independent board of trustees and have oversight of our plans and our activities from the Public Utilities Commission in our state. But we are the one-stop shop for administering all of the energy efficiency programs and the greenhouse gas reduction programs that we get funded either through the utilities directly or from other pots of funding, such as federal grants that we're going to talk about today, also the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative revenues, and occasionally some settlements that come out of the Public Utilities Commission. Our stock and trade is to provide rebates and financing, and we accompany that with technical information, customer engagement, measurement and verification and evaluations, and a very handy website that I would welcome you all to check out at your convenience. Okay, so let me just introduce you to how our organization and our state decided to deploy some of these ARPA funds that came to Maine for the purpose of promoting weatherization in low and moderate income homes. A little bit of context, Nick sort of touched on this, but I'll go a little bit deeper. The federal regulations governing how the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds can be used, it talks specifically about some eligible customers and eligible uses. And I'm just going to leave this up here. It's this is the lawyer in me, can't resist putting all the words on the page just so you would know exactly what is and isn't allowed. And I thought maybe if you wanted to go back and reference this presentation later, you would see this page might come in handy. But the first thing to note is that it is presumed that the following populations would be disproportionately impacted by the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts. And that is key in defining what is an allowable use for these funds. So you see here this list: households and populations that are residing in census tracts, tribal governments, territories, and not least of which is low-income households and populations, as well as households that qualify for TANF, SNAP, free and reduced lunch, etc. So we know that low and moderate income populations are presumptively a disproportionately impacted community. The next piece of the equation is whether weatherization would also be an allowable use. And very clearly, it is one of the enumerated allowable uses. So if you see down at the bottom of the page here, one of the ways that states and municipalities can respond to the negative economic impacts of the pandemic is to provide assistance to households and individuals, including through provision of weatherization. So there you go. The low and moderate income populations are eligible, and presumptively so, and the use of the funds for weatherization is not only eligible, but presumptively an allowable use. So that's a little bit of the regulatory framework. How about the policy framework from our state? Well, and the first thing I should mention is that Maine, the state of Maine, not the municipalities, obviously that's separate, but the state's share of these funds was just about $1 billion. So the state had some choices to make about how it wanted to allocate $1 billion. And one of the first places they turned to think about how they would allocate those funds was to look back to the very fresh in our minds, recently recommended set of steps in our state climate action plan that grew out of more than a year worth of stakeholder discussions. And one of the key strategies, it won't surprise anyone on this call at an ACEEE meeting, was to work on modernizing our buildings and upgrading, in particular, the very old building stock in our state by improving the efficiency of those buildings. One of the goals was to double the current pace of home weatherization in our state, and it set certain specific targets, including adding at least 1,000 low-income units per year to being weatherized. And then we have 2030 targets for trying to reach 35,000 newly weatherized homes in our state. So we had that policy document guiding us and breathing down our neck saying, hey, if you have some money, this is the direction we want you to go because this needs help and it's important to reaching our climate targets. The other thing guiding us then was the governor's plan for how to allocate the funds. So having looked at a wide spectrum of needs in our state, including that climate action plan, the governor recommended something called the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan. That was reviewed ultimately by the state legislature and enacted through LD 1733 back in 2021. One of the allocations of funds was $50 million to our organization to reduce energy costs, improve public health, and cut carbon emissions. And half of that was specifically set aside to accelerate weatherization and efficiency upgrades for Maine homes, especially for low-income, older Mainers, and renters. So that's how the money came to us, and that's why the money came to us. So let's talk about what Efficiency Maine does and what our plans and our progress so far has been for the use of these funds. As I said before, our organization is set up specifically to run energy conservation programs. We have requirements to establish a 3-year strategic plan, and that gets reviewed by our Board of Trustees and then approved by the Public Utilities Commission. Among the targets that we are directed to pursue with that plan are reducing energy costs, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and in particular, weatherizing homes. And you'll see that that matches the targets that were put in the climate action plan. So our statute now directs us to design our plans to put us on a pathway to meet the targets that were in that climate action plan. So 35,000 homes by 2030, of which at least 10,000 should be from low-income homes. It's important to note that in our state, the federally funded Weatherization Assistance Program, or WAP, as Nick referred to it, is not administered by our organization. It's administered by a sister quasi-state agency called the Maine State Housing Authority. So we are working collaboratively with them. They have some funds to do weatherization, and we also have some funds to do weatherization. So I'll come back to that in a minute, how we are collaborating. But I also will mention here that the statute has directed us to also use our programs and some of the funds we get to advance goals specific to heat pump installations. And we are among the leading states in the country in getting heat pumps installed. And we are seeing really good results in low income homes, in particular mobile homes. That's not really what I'm going to talk about today. I'm mostly going to focus on the weatherization, but if people have questions afterwards, I'd be happy to chat about that. So let me keep moving. Our project that we are using these federal funds, these ARPA funds to administer is described as you see on this page here. So we're going to, over the next 4 years, focus on accelerating home weatherization for low and moderate income households. And we're going to build on the existing programs that we have had in place for that. We're going to try and do it in a way that complements our state weatherization assistance program, which uses the DOE funds. And I'll just cover that for 1 second, as I don't know how other states do it. In our state, the Maine Housing Authority is focused, it prioritizes the neediest homes based on energy burden to weatherize first. And I'm sure it's the same in all of your states and cities as well. There just isn't enough money to go around to do all of them. So they are targeting the neediest. And we have designed our program to be something that would complement that. So there's a design element of what we have that generally ensures that we're not going to be tripping over each other and trying to serve the identical customer groups. So I'll talk about that in a second. Eligible customers will be anyone who is rolled in any state or federal program that is means tested for income. So that includes LIHEAP, TANF, SNAP, Medicaid. And we also introduced an innovation to look at the municipal property value on the tax rolls to try and target the bottom quartile of property values. What is the design of this program? It's pretty straightforward. We're limiting this to owner-occupied families, family homes, or up to 4 units. It's got to be heated through the entire season. Folks may know that Maine has a lot of vacation homes. We're not interested in trying to weatherize those with these dollars. This is targeting folks who live in these homes year-round. And you have to use a registered vendor, someone who's registered with us to provide these kinds of services, which ensures that we know they have some basic qualifications. The installation requirements I think are pretty typical. We require a pre and post blower door test. We require that they work through a checklist that gets filled out and then submitted to us so we can see some of the baseline information, and we can also see what is recommended to be installed in the home. There are basic air sealing and insulation standards that have to be met with regard to the attic and the walls and the basement and a few other things on the checklist. And then they need to conduct a combustion safety test on the test out. So those are some both quality and safety assurances. There's more to it, but that's the gist. From the last piece of it is we accompany all of this with a lot of outreach. We're doing a lot of partnering with community organizations and municipal officials. We have been able to push hard through the media and both print and radio, as well as doing a lot on digital ads and social media. And our website is a terrific resource to help people get started. But it's probably most notable about this program design that we are requiring a small customer copayment. And that is the way that we think we are complementing and not duplicating the efforts of our WAP program in our state. So these are going to be customers who, while they are lower income, they still have enough discretionary savings to find a way to help to cover this 10% copay. So we're offering very generous rebates up to $9,000 for the installation and also full $600 on the energy assessment and air sealing, which means they could get the value of $9,600 as much as that. The average that we're seeing is about a $6,000 project, and it's really starting to take off. So the last little bit that I'll share and then turn it over to the other speaker is that In the midst of the pandemic and what we experienced as a real slowdown in weatherization in our state and a real interruption in particular to weatherization contractors, these new beefed up incentives is really getting the attention of the contractors, and they are motivated to market this directly to customers. And that's what we were hoping for. We're trying to take advantage of the private sector businesses to target and provide services to these customers. So our forecast for what we'll be able to do with this $25 million is just shy of 3,500 dwellings will be weatherized. We think, based on our prior results, that we'll see about 30 MMBTU per year savings in each dwelling. When we first calculated this, the price of a gallon of oil was $3. And so we estimated that that would deliver $700 a year in savings over the lifetime of those projects. We would expect to see something more like $15,000. Who knows where oil prices will land, but conservatively $3 seems reasonable, and you can see that there's a lot of savings to be had there. Finally, I think this is my last slide. That green arrow is when we announced that we were launching this program, and that shows you the level of weatherization activity that we were seeing for low and moderate income customers through our incentive programs. Our incentives were not as generous then, and we were not able to really fully market this because we didn't think we would have enough money to really serve a high demand. But it has just taken off since then. What we're seeing is much greater activity of projects, and the size of the projects has doubled. We're now finding that contractors are increasing their wages and hiring new staff and buying new equipment, and that's exactly what we were hoping to see. So I believe that wraps it up, and I will hand it off to Jessica.
Hey, sharing screen. Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to sharing about our Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator in DC. So I was asked to share about how our work, to leverage these federal stimulus funds to create this Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator, and then some specifics around equity and stakeholder engagement. So some really important context to that is about how equity and stakeholder engagement was baked into our building energy performance standards, DC's building energy performance standards, which are the energy efficiency regulations that apply to buildings in the district over 50,000 square feet, including affordable housing. So this accelerator was specifically designed to help affordable housing buildings meet these building energy performance standards. So I'll start off talking about our BEPS, which is our shorthand for the building energy performance standards, those regulations. And then I'll go into a little bit more detail about the accelerator and some lessons learned so far. So the building energy performance standards are a set of regulations established in 2018 that set a minimum performance standard for all buildings over 50,000 square feet to be no lower than the local median Energy Star score for that property type. So we are currently in the first cycle of BEPS, which is a 5-year cycle. And then every cycle after that, 6 years from now, 12 years from now, is going to be, the BEPS is going to become more rigorous over time. So the first cycle began in 2021, and any building that at that time didn't meet the standard is entered into a 5-year compliance cycle. And the building owner has until the end of the compliance cycle, so the year 2026, to bring their building into compliance with the standard, which includes doing the necessary energy efficiency upgrades. So here are some examples of what the standards are for the different housing types. You can see right at the top, we have multifamily housing. That standard is an Energy Star score of 66. So any building that didn't meet the Energy Star score of 66, that's multifamily, would have to do building upgrades in order to get to that level by the year 2026. And there are a number of different ways that a building owner can approach getting to that energy standard and show compliance. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details, but what I wanted to do is just show the column all the way to the right, some alternative compliance pathways that were specifically designed for some special circumstances like affordable housing. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. So some specific equity considerations. There was a lot of discussion, and I joined the Building Energy Performance team in 2000, just last fall, about 10 months ago. And so a lot of work went into the development of these BEPS regulations. And there was discussion at the time on considering if affordable housing should be included in the BEPS or not included in the BEPS. There is a discussion of it could be hard and burdensome for affordable housing, but ultimately where the district landed was to include affordable housing in the BEPS because of the investment that and the benefits from the investment in energy efficiency that could result in utility bill savings for the residents and potential indoor air quality benefits. And so I think at this point, it's a really good time to share a little bit of the stakeholder engagement. So in development of the BEPS, there was a specific stakeholder engagement group that was pulled together with the benefit of a grant from the Energy Foundation, and that was led by the National Housing Trust and HAND, two organizations that are advocacy groups for equity, greater equity in housing. And in addition to that, our branch chief, Katie Bergfeld, was included in that stakeholder engagement group. And the results that came from those discussions were really instrumental in making sure that there was not only, or that there were special regulatory pathways for affordable housing and programs specifically designed for affordable housing to help them meet these standards. So for example, there is an alternative compliance pathway for extended deep energy retrofits so that they could delay compliance a little bit longer if they had a plan for accessing perhaps federal tax credit dollars to do a deeper energy retrofit, or a delay of compliance is another option if there is specifically financial distress. And then really importantly, what came out of that group was the need for direct assistance, not only financial assistance, but technical assistance to help the building owners know what upgrades would be needed for their buildings to help them meet the standards. And then not only that, but assistance in doing the regulatory reporting and meeting all of the deadlines for the regulatory reporting. So with the guidance from that stakeholder group led by those advocacy organizations in partnership with the DOEE, around that kind of came to a conclusion, and around the time of, let's see, this was in about a year ago, DC received federal stimulus funds. And again, this was before my time, but it was pretty wide what those funds could be used for, a wide variety of programs. And the mayor asked everybody to submit their best ideas for how these federal stimulus funds could be used. And so our Deputy Department Director, Dave Epley, pulled together a description based on the needs outlined by this affordable housing community to request assistance for the development of the affordable housing retrofit accelerator. And that was approved. And so we launched right into partnering with are these partner organizations, the DC Sustainable Energy Utility and the DC Green Bank, to develop the Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator, which was launched in December of 2021, less than a year ago. And so a little bit of details about the accelerator. So for eligible buildings, we did a huge outreach effort in the fall and over the winter. And for all buildings that applied by January 15th, we are guaranteeing funding and support for energy audits, retro commissioning, installation of new energy efficient building equipment, and then loans for deeper energy retrofits. And then we also are providing one-on-one technical guidance for understanding the BEPS regulations and deadlines, and develop an action plan to implement their energy saving measures over time. The buildings that are eligible are those that, for the accelerator, are those that are also required to meet those building energy performance standards. So that threshold is multifamily buildings over 50,000 square feet that meet our definition of affordable housing. And there's a little bit of detail down here about what that definition is in our regulations, but it's essentially if at least 50% of the building's dwelling units are occupied or rent to people with incomes less than or equal to 80% of the area median income. And then here's a little bit of an overview of the funding. So we are receiving $35 million a year, and that's distributed in a number of different ways. So about 20 million is distributed through our partner organization, the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, for energy audits, the direct installs of energy efficiency measures, and program guidance. And then about 10 million is distributed through the DC Green Bank for construction loans. And then a section of it, about 5 million, actually is being distributed through a different program overall. DCHA is our public housing. So they are getting specific carve out for doing upgrades in those buildings. And then some funding and staffing, funding for staffing. And so I just wanted to share some lessons learned so far on implementing this. So we are at the stage, we're still in a fairly early stage where we've done all of the intake efforts. We're still continuing. We have it open to building owners that are eligible to at least get an energy audit. One of the things that we're really focusing on now is we are in the portion of really information gathering. So we're doing occupant surveys of the residents in the buildings that have applied. And so those are questions about the health and energy burden and demographics. And we're also doing the energy audits themselves in the building. So really investigating what are the opportunities for energy savings in these buildings. And there have been, so that's kind of the stage that we're in right now. We have deployed a few energy upgrades, but really we're expecting to do the majority of the construction and upgrades starting in the next fiscal year, starting in October. Though we're starting to do a few of those right now. What we've learned in at least this initial investigation auditing phase is that it's really important to get early input from the building owners and the building managers to make sure that we are presenting energy efficiency upgrades that work for them in their maintenance teams and in their long-term capital planning process, so that they don't feel like we are pushing some building efficiency measure that they don't want to work or wouldn't work for them for some reason. So collaboration with the building owners is really important. Another question that they had were, what are ways in which we can provide them, this program can provide them assurances that they will actually meet those standards in the future. So how we have designed the program is actually along our prescriptive pathway, where if they agree to install measures that add up to 25% savings according to their energy model. And then they do those measures and they demonstrate that they've been implemented, whether it's lighting upgrades, HVAC upgrades, or retro commissioning. As long as they demonstrate that they've done that and are doing the correct operations and maintenance, then they are set for compliance with the BEPS, even if there's something funny happens with the actual performance in the year 2026. And so we're designing our program to go along that prescriptive pathway. And then another thing we were thinking about is to design the program to anticipate that we're going to do deep energy retrofits so that buildings can have multiple cycles of compliance, because we don't want to do just enough of a building upgrade that they meet this cycle of the BEPS, but then would be immediately out of compliance with the next cycle of the BEPS. So we really want multi-cycle compliance. And right now we have this federal stimulus funding that is limited time. And so rather than just doing the minimum, we're actually designing to multi-cycle compliance. And what's been surprising to us is that that is not actually normally the typical business model for the auditing companies. They don't expect to do, in a typical energy audit, they don't expect to offer deep energy retrofit options for existing buildings. Usually it's around a 10% improvement, things with a quick payback, but we're actually looking to do things beyond just the quick payback. And so we had to do some really kind of clear expectation setting for the auditors to make sure that they were helping us uncover more than just the quick payback items, because we wanted to do some deeper energy retrofits. And we are just getting into the phase now with resident engagement, but one of the things that we're really mindful of is to really have the building owners involved in understanding kind of the intent and what the survey would include in resident engagement, because this is a voluntary program and we want to make sure that we are not doing anything that they're not comfortable with, and that they understand the intent behind this resident engagement, where if we can have a survey that shows that we do before and after an upgrade that can show an improvement in energy, or I guess show that energy bills have gone down or increased comfort or increased indoor air quality, that's a really good story to tell and why we want to do that kind of resident engagement. So that's all I have. I probably should have said this in the beginning, but I'm Jessica Aberland, and I'm the BEPS Strategy Engagement Lead for the Building Performance and Enforcement Branch with DC DOEE. And I'll hand it back over to Nick. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the questions.
Thank you so much, Nick, Michael, and Jessica, for your insight and for sharing the process and motivation behind using ARPA funds for affordable housing retrofits. So we've reached the Q&A segment of the webinar. And just a reminder, if you're interested in asking a question, please submit it via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I see many coming in. And any of the speakers and ACEEE staff can jump in to answer questions. So I'm just going to open up the Q&A here. So I'm seeing one that's being upvoted here, and Michael, this question is for you. Is Maine having success scaling up the workforce to perform weatherization work? Any tips for other more rural and lower population areas?
Thanks for the question. I think I have a two-part answer for that. First, generally, we've really been thrilled by the rebound that we've seen in the workforce in the last 6 months, because the combination of the Delta variant and then the Omicron variant really wiped out our workforce capacity on this particular service. So we saw the numbers drop, both of projects and workforce, but our ability to increase these incentives significantly has brought folks running back into the sector. So that's been great. I don't know how long it will keep growing because as you know, in all sectors, there's a shortage of workforce. And so, the number one thing that we have experienced here, and the thing we can do from where we sit in our organization, is to drive demand. So driving demand puts the ball in the court of the small businesses who run, the contractors who do this work to hire up staff, to train up staff, and to what we're seeing is increasing their wages significantly. So that is happening. How much it will keep growing, I don't know, because I think that we're going to hit a limit at some point because there just aren't very many people available to keep doing, to keep adding to the workforce in this area. We're seeing, I should mention that one of the other things that our governor's plan proposed was to take $8 million and set it aside for specifically for workforce training for clean energy sector. So there's something called the Clean Energy Partnership. And if you search for it online, you'll find that's being run out of the governor's energy office here in Maine. They allocated $8 million to that. And one of their top priorities is figuring out how we can bring more people into the weatherization services. Lastly, I'll just say on remote and rural areas, that is a really tough challenge. One way that we can do that, if need be, we have not done it yet, is to increase and to pay a premium for the incentives that we would offer in those places to make it worth the time for folks to get up to these more remote areas and spend a week or 2 weeks there. In some of our island communities, we've done what's called collective purchasing, where we go around and sign up as many customers as we can. And that makes it worthwhile for a contractor to go out there and spend a week or two, and that keeps the cost down. So there are some tricks we have up our sleeve, but it's really tough work.
Thanks, Michael. So the next question is, what about other critical repair needs? Oh, I lost it.
Yeah, I'll try this, and maybe Jessica can chime in as well. So we follow the usual approach that you see in the WAP program, which is we will allow up to a certain percentage of the total project cost to go towards those kinds of repairs. I forget what the exact number is. It's usually 25%.
Yeah, we don't really have, we haven't allocated funding specifically to needs, but it is something that we're talking about. And so we partner with the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, and one of the first projects that we reviewed had a boiler that, a chiller that was about to not function anymore. And so we fast tracked that one because as we're in 95-degree heat wave right now, to get that one going as fast as possible. So we do kind of take into consideration any critical issues and making sure that those are kind of prioritized first. And we haven't done any specific decision-making on sort of like, we do have partner organizations that do weatherization assistance and that sort of work that we meet with on a quarterly basis. There is also limited funding for them as well.
So the next question is about heat pumps. Are you covering 100% of project costs there?
First of all, I think I can actually lump two questions together. We have a really comprehensive program in Maine promoting heat pumps for all sectors of the economy. At one extreme end of the spectrum, the Maine State Housing Authority has now started using a fraction of their LIHEAP funds, which they had set aside for weatherization. They're now using that to pay for heat pumps for qualifying LIHEAP homes. And yes, they are paying 100% of the project cost for those. And they're doing about 1,000 a year. We also provide an increased rebate, an enhanced rebate for qualifying or income eligible homes that is not 100% of the project cost. We offer 80% up to $2,000 of a qualifying heat pump project. So as you can see, we sort of have this spectrum of where you are on the income scale and a graduated system or tiered system of incentives.
So we haven't picked specifically heat pumps as the technology. In multifamily, we just had an info session actually to learn a little bit more about how to do a replacement of a central domestic hot water boiler, replace that with a commercial grade heat pump. The lead times are really long on ordering those, especially in our part of the country where the market's pretty new. It's about 2 to 3 years. So we actually just learned that this week. But rather than picking any kind of specific technology, what we're doing is we're doing a full ASHRAE level 2 audit, which will identify a number of different items, including heat pumps, but also potential to switch from a central kind of boiler chiller system over to a VRF system, lighting, all of the things. And then what we're planning to do is a combination of direct funding with a green bank loan product that's a low interest loan, but that would be designed with the interest rate and the terms so that the monthly payment over the course of the year is not any more than the energy savings from those energy standards. So that's how we're kind of designing the funding. What's good about that is we're sort of unlocking potential dollars from the owner that where they would be benefiting. So we're kind of getting back some of those dollars of energy savings that would then go back into the green bank to be able to fund additional projects in the future for other buildings. So that's currently how we're thinking about designing it right now. So again, it's not really heat pump specific, but a heat pump could definitely be something that is technology to meet those energy efficiency needs. I should say also, we specifically are not I mentioned our prescriptive pathway for compliance with the building energy performance standards. That prescriptive pathway does not allow any building to take credit for a gas replacement measure. And so in that way, we're really just incentivizing electric measures. You can do things like insulation on existing gas equipment or piping, or controls that you could take credit for as far as a % improvement, but not direct replacement of those. It would have to be just electric measures.
So we have about 5 minutes left, and I'll go through some of the questions, but if the participants can also answer some of the questions by typing their answers, that would be great, so we can get to as many questions as possible. My next question is, what kinds of metrics are being used to evaluate the effectiveness of these programs? What is being considered successful?
I can start on this one if you want a little bit of a break being the first one to go, Michael.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Sure. Great. So we have targeted 100. We've identified 100 multifamily buildings that meet our definition of affordable and also don't meet our BEPS. And so our goal is to get each and every one of those buildings into the accelerator, and so and support in some sort of way. And we have been in contact, I think, with all but 15 of those. Sometimes it's really hard to track folks down. So that's one metric that we're tracking. We're setting goals for the number of energy audits completed by the end of this fiscal year. We're going to set another goal by the next fiscal year. And then we're also tracking number of projects. And a project is defined by any set of energy efficiency measures that are included in an incentive agreement. And another really important thing that we are tracking is the affordability agreements of each of those buildings. So after the building, as part of any incentive agreement, the owner has to make an agreement to not pass any of those costs onto the tenant. And so each of the goal is for each of the participants to sign an agreement that either has an existing covenant that requires them to increase rents no more than some certain threshold, or if they are currently under rent control, that they don't request an exemption to the rent control in order to increase rents and pass on the cost of these measures to their tenants. So that's another thing that we're tracking. There's a lot more, but I'll leave it at that. Those are some of the big ones right now.
I forgot what the question was. I was trying to work on some of the other ones in the margin. Can you remind me what the question was?
It was metrics.
How do we evaluate and do metrics?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it won't surprise people on this call to hear that, weatherization has been going on for many, many years in lots and lots of places. And so our approach to both calculating the deemed savings and then after the fact, going back and doing evaluations using statistical sampling and measuring actual energy consumption in the home. I mean, it's pretty standard stuff. We do evaluations every 3 years of every major program. So we feel pretty rock solid on what we are getting in terms of energy savings for the measures that are being installed. But, we check it too every 3 years. And so that's how we go about doing it.
Yeah, I'll also add that we have a pretty hard metric in that our building energy performance standards are based on performance. And so we're going to be looking at these buildings in 2026 and seeing if they did meet the standards. So it's not necessarily a MNV of each individual measure, but we are going to be looking to see that they met that standard.
So I think we have time for about 2 more questions. One of them is, can ARPA funds be used for fuel switching?
Yeah, I started to answer this. I have seen nothing in the guidance or the regs that would suggest you can't. I know that that's a longstanding rule for use of the DOE's WAP money, but I haven't seen anything about that in the ARPA statute or the regs or the guidance. Maybe somebody can point me to where that is, but I haven't seen it. All that you see there in terms of guidance is aimed towards helping customers that have been disproportionately impacted by the economic harms from COVID to get back on their feet. So if it will help them save money, I think ARPA is fine with it. That would be my general takeaway. And as I said to somebody in one of the other comments, in Maine, it just so happens that 60% of all home heating is done with number 2 distillate oil, and another 10% is done with propane. And both of those fuel types are very expensive. They're relatively more expensive. So heat pumps, for as long as we've been running this program, are an absolute money saver for the home that is being upgraded. And so that has been a strong case that we made to say this is going to help them out economically, to say nothing of the environmental benefits.
Yeah, I would ditto that. My understanding is that localities have really wide latitude on implementing this for anything that will help with that economic recovery from the stimulus. So not even necessarily energy or environmentally related to help recover from COVID.
Right, and having read through the final rule a few times, I share that interpretation.
So I'll ask, we're actually at time. I wish that we could answer all of your questions, but I want to thank you all for attending this webinar, and thank you so much for participating. We will all be sending out the recording of the webinar in a few business days, and we hope that you are motivated and have learned something about how you can take advantage of new federal funding opportunities to make affordable housing in your jurisdiction more energy efficient. Thank you so much and have a great day.